Filipino UCC Partners online conference. I know there are people who might be joining us a bit later, especially some here in Canada who may just be finishing their dinner. I just want to catch up with news before they jump into another Zoom meeting. I think we are all aware that these days we are being zoomed out. Several Zoom meetings taking place. It's a platform that has been made accessible to most of us to be enabled to continue working with each other, to be enabled to continue partnering with each other, see each other, share with each other. And in these COVID-related challenges, when many things have been limited, we say, thank you, Lord, for technology. Thank God for technology that can still enable us to be in touch with one another. So you are all welcome, welcome, welcome. I see that all our partners from the Philippines have already joined in. Other participants will continue joining us as they come along. So in opening our meeting, we do have our new General Secretary for the United Church of Canada. We are so privileged that he could find time to come in and just greet all of us before we start our meeting. So I will invite the Reverend Michael Blair to greet the gathering. Over to you, Michael.
Thanks, Dr. Jaffet. Good evening, morning, I think, for you folks, friends. It's good to see many of you that I know, and I'm looking forward to the opportunity to hear a bit more in terms of what's going on. So welcome, and know that the Philippines is a favorite partner, I should say that, need to say that carefully, of the United Church. And it's great to be able to be with you and spend some time with you tonight. So take care, look forward to the conversation.
Thank you very much, Michael. And we do have the team leader for the Global Partnership Program, Patty Talbot, who's also with us, and maybe with us for a few minutes before she jumps into another meeting. So let me give her this opportunity to greet the meeting.
Thank you, Japheth. And just like Michael, I feel like saying, oh, it's so good to see you, brothers and sisters. Your faces, it does my heart good. It is wonderful to see you and to bring to mind the deep bonds of love and care, support, and solidarity that exist among and between us. You know that our spirits are with you, and it is a privilege to walk with you as we can and to be with you tonight. So thank you to Japhet for the work in bringing us all together, and we look very much forward to hearing from you. Love and support to each one.
Thank you very much, Patty. And many of you, some of you maybe just see the name Josie because she writes to you so many times. Let me ask Josie just to say hi so people can know who is this person always writing to them and say, send your report. And Josie, just greet the people.
Since 2004, I think. I've been doing that to all of you. So welcome to everyone, and I'm glad that we have this chance to gather tonight and see each other virtually. And I'm hoping for a good conversation too. Thank you all.
Thank you, Josie. We will now have Bishop Labuntog, who will open for us with our prayers and words of devotion for our online gathering. Bishop Labuntog from the United Church of Christ in the Philippines.
Good morning from the Philippines and good evening there. Let me share to you a very short reflection entitled Servanthood means involvement. This is a paraphrase of Matthew chapter 5, verses 5, chapter 10, verses 5 to 33, and John 20:21, originally by Leslie Brandt from his book, Jesus Now. I am revising it for our reflection today. God came to us through Jesus Christ. It was in this manner that he became involved in our agonies and crying needs, even to the point of bearing our sins and receiving upon himself their guilt and consequences. It was because of that involvement that he found us and redeemed us, drawing us to himself and the kingdom. This involvement continues in our world through those who follow Christ. Jesus has set the pace. He expects his disciples to keep it. We are to become involved in humankind's crying needs, to become identified with people in their sorrows and joys. We do this as the servants of Jesus Christ, and in doing so, we represent him. Infilled with his love, we are to reflect that love and concern to others about us. It is not enough to condemn the distortions of humanity from the pulpits and pews of our churches. We are elected to become involved in the blood and tears, the hurts and sufferings, the oppression and deprivation of God's creation in the urban areas, in the marketplaces, in the rural, or in the countrysides, and whenever they may be found. We are elected to become involved in the blood and tears of parents who have lost their children in an unjust drug war, children who have lost their parents because of extrajudicial killings, indigenous peoples who have lost their ancestral land and self by being uprooted from their places, indigenous children who will also lose their future. Because we are already involved in the sickness of this world, we must, if we follow Jesus, now become involved in its cure. This will not be convenient or comfortable. It might be even dangerous. We may have to risk reputations, wealth if we have, or status in society, even our very lives in this involvement. Following Jesus, however, requires this kind of involvement. As he suffered on our behalf, we are expected to suffer on behalf of others for his sake, to lose our lives in the service to them only to find them anew in the incomparable joy of being the sons and daughters of the living God and his loyal disciples and followers. As the Father has sent me, even so I send you, Jesus once said to his disciples. This is what he's saying to us today. Amen. Thank you and good morning to everyone.
Amen. Thank you very much, Bishop Labuntug, for that opening reflection. We will have a song. Carla will play for us a solidarity song, and if it is all in Tagalog, we'll ask Becca to translate for us.
Pagkatapos nito, babalik lang ba tayo sa normal? Sa mabilis na takbo ng buhay, araw-araw ay sugal. Silang panalo, tayo ang talunan, sa araw-araw na pakikipagsapalaran. Yan ba ang babalikan pagkatapos nito? Yan ba ang babalikan pagkatapos nito? Pagkatapos nito, balik lang ba sa dating gawin? Sa marahas na takbo ng buhay, puno ng takot at pangamba, ligalig-ang laking kaulayaw, mula umaga hanggang gabi. Yan ba ang haharapin pagkatapos nito? Yan ba ang haharapin pagkatapos nito? Pagkatapos nito, may bago tayong lakas. Sama-sama nating tahakin ang ating landas. Iwawas ko ang liko-likong daan, isisigaw ang ating panawagan. Mas maayos na lipunan pagkatapos nito. Mas maayos na lipunan pagkatapos nito. Alam na natin ang dapat na gawin. Kailangang dapat na baguhin. Anong uunahin, kailan sisimulan? Pag-ising natin kinabukasan, pagbangon natin pagkatapos nito. Pagbangon natin pagkatapos nito. Pagkatapos nito, babangon tayo pagkatapos nito.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much. This time, friends, we'll now invite the General Secretary of the National Council of Churches, Bishop Ruel Marigza, to share with us the keynote address for our gathering. Bishop Ruel is not a stranger to all of us, I'm sure, who are gathered in this platform. He's the immediate past General Secretary for the United Church of Christ in the Philippines, and he served on the Partnership Council of the United Church of Canada for quite some time, and so he's been a long-time friend of the United Church of Canada. Over to you, Bishop Ruel.
Good morning, brothers and sisters, and good evening there. Let me start by going back to a document issued by the United Church of Canada in 1997, which the Reverend Michael Blair, who just greeted us earlier as new General Secretary, of UCC points to as a shift in how the UCC regards its mission. In an interview with the Presbyterian Outlook, Michael said that it was a way for the church to think about its ecumenical and interfaith work, centering around how God is creatively and redemptively at work in the religious life of all humanity. I'm sure for the UCC members, you are very familiar with this. That document is entitled Mending the World, an Ecumenical Vision for Healing and Reconciliation. And let me just share that part of the introduction or the prelude. The document began with a story shared by Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, that when God, the Holy One, gets up in the morning, God gathers the angels of heaven around and asks this simple question: where does my creation need mending today? And then Rabbi Heschel would continue, theology consists of worrying about what God worries about when God gets up in the morning. We hold the conviction that the world is at the center of God's concern. In the words of the psalmist, the earth is the Lord's and all that is in it, the world and they who dwell therein. The world is at risk because there are those who refusing to see through tears, seek dominion and use the instruments of military, economic, political, and cultural power to that end. God, who sees clearly through tears, is grieved by the estrangement of God's children from one another and from the created order. God's work at the beginning of the day as at end for the mending of creation. Life in the whole inhabited world, or oikomeni, is life in relationship. We are bound up with one another and with the world of nature, not just our kinfolk or our kind. We are thus led to speak of the whole world ecumenism, naming the search for justice for God's creatures and healing for God's creation as the church's first priority, and joining with other persons of goodwill in the search for justice, wholeness, and love. Our passion for transformation of the world is rooted in our relationship to God in Jesus Christ. God, who is absolute love, mercy, and justice, yearns for mending of creation, calling us to see the world through God's tears and to bend ourselves as a church to the task of worrying about what God worries about when God gets up in the morning. On behalf of your Filipino partners, I thank the United Church of Canada for partnering with us in our common effort to express in word and deed God's concern to mend the world so that it becomes indeed a place where justice, wholeness, and love exist and flourish. May I share with you areas of concern where mending is needed in our part of the world. I'll speak basically of the rising tyranny that's happening here. The Philippine government, taking advantage of the global pandemic, has just approved the so-called anti-terrorism law. We call it actually the terror law, with its draconian measures, triggering more than 30 petitions in the Supreme Court to question its constitutionality. Petitioners believe that it runs counter to the provisions of the Philippine Constitution, especially on the Bill of Rights. The law allows for detention up to 24 days without any charge. It can authorize electronic surveillance and freezing of bank accounts on mere suspicion alone. It created an anti-terrorist council from the executive branch that can designate groups and individuals as terrorists and many others. Given the record of this administration, we are very much concerned. But even before the anti-terror law, as we call it, perceived enemies of the state had been red tagged and vilified. And some of them ended up as being killed, like Ben Ramos, who is the 34th lawyer killed under the Duterte administration. And this follows a pattern of first being vilified or red tagged as members or sympathizers of the Communist Party of the Philippines or the New People's Army. But this is not just mere tagging of people, because it results, as I've said, to even death. The former General Secretary of the NCCP, Bishop Rex Reyes, said it can also be considered as a death sentence. There is nothing wrong with being called a leftist, but what is wrong is when a person is killed because he or she is part of the left. Vilifying and demonizing a person is vilifying and demonizing the work of God. Red tagging, which is now a very common occurrence here in the Philippines, short circuits the fundamental process of the democratic discourse and violates due process, especially as it curtails, among others, the freedom of expression. It is thus unfair to the NCCP, which has been red tagged, as it is to all others, persons or civil society organizations, to be in the list. We assert that red tagging the NCCP violates our right to the exercise of the freedom of religion, indeed to the exercise of ministries in furtherance of our religious beliefs. Such freedoms are at the core of the Bill of Rights of the Philippine Constitution. Any such practice that red tags and vilifies legitimate ministries, such as the NCCP's, albeit in the context of the government's counterinsurgency program and its whole of nation approach, subverts the majesty of democratic governance. Here you will find how this rising tyranny and red tagging has become a part of our daily life as people who are doing prophetic ministries and social justice. On the picture are, of course, some of your partners here in the Philippines. There's Wendell, there's Sarah there. And these are posted in the social media like Facebook, and which vilifies and tags these personalities. And I think it's even by association, because you see, I'm seated with Wendell in this post. We were having a press conference, and I was reading the statement of the National Council on the Anti-Terrorism Law, and the caption says their father, they must have mistaken me for a priest, maybe these are the people you are calling church people, so that you are afraid. And so they put there the picture of Joe Macison, Renato Reyes, and others. And on the other side is calls, are you fighting for democracy or communism? Remember that communism is a system that does not believe in God, it says. Even before the terror law was passed, there have been a lot of trump-up cases that have been put forward. There was a time that there was a list of 600 people who are put on a list that are supposed to be communist terrorists. And these are just a sample, and this is the case that was filed, although a lot of them were eventually dismissed. Trump-up cases are very common. Rachel Mariano, for instance, was jailed last September 2018 on the charge that he participated in an ambush. And so she was charged with murder and frustrated murder. But eventually the courts dismissed the charges. But that is after over a year of imprisonment. Even the Catholic hierarchy is not spared from being filed cases. For instance, the Catholic Archbishop Socrates Villegas, Bishop Onchoco, Pablo David, who is very outspoken against the drug war, Bishop Bacani, 3 priests, and several others were filed a case of sedition, cyber libel, estafa, and harboring of criminals. The rural missionaries of the Philippines had been also red tagged, and the military is accusing them of channeling funds to the communist terrorist group. Together with IFI priests, they were among the respondents of a libel case and slander filed by the National Security Advisor. You find this very common as well, especially in Mindanao. There are writings on the wall, if you may say so, that says that IFI Church is a haven for, or a sanctuary for the NPA. And Bishop Kalang, one of the bishops who have been red tagged, says that these acts of labeling the IFI and its clergy as terrorists and sheltering of NPAs are part of well-planned and deliberate efforts to malign and discredit our ministry and meant to intimidate us into silence from our advocacies for peace and social justice. Again, I hope not by association again, but the IFI and the UCCP, which a partnership covenant, are subjected to also to these kinds of vilification, bearing the messages IFI and is equal to NPA or UCCP equal to the NPA. So a new normal under the President Duterte's government, law enforcement structures and the legal system had been used to threaten and harass church people, whom he seeks to intimidate with serious charges such as conspiracy or sedition and threat of jail time. The United Methodists also have their share of those that have been unduly accused of coddling New People's Army and search without warrant in one of their church facilities in Mindoro. United Church of Christ in the Philippines, Pastor Jimmy Teves and 6 of its members, and also the IFI in Himamaylan, in Negros Occidental on June 2019, were arrested after being accused as being NPA combatants. The UCCP hosts evacuees or internal refugees in its compound in Davao in Mindanao. And at one time, the paramilitary group Alamara and suspected civilian agents broke into the compound And despite the attacks, intimidation, and destruction of property, the PNP who were there did not arrest any of the perpetrators. Surprisingly, 10 days before the incident, the Region 11 Regional Peace and Order Council issued a resolution demanding the closure of UCC Piharan Mission Center for accommodating these Lumad evacuees. There is now filed in the prosecutor's office in Davao against 48 persons, including 17 leaders of the United Church. Cases ranging from child abuse to child trafficking, and one on the international humanitarian law. February 16 this year, the military confronted the residents and told them that the local peasant organization that they are part of is an NPA front being supported by the IFI, UCCP, and the NCCP. Even relief operations conducted by the NCCP in response to natural calamities was maliciously implicated. And as I have shown earlier, those that are red tagged and vilified open end up being murdered and killed. As Beverly Long says, it's not simply red tagging. The important aspect of it is it violates the freedom of expression, right to peaceful assembly, and the right to self-determination, among others. Such violations of these rights gives an impression that to resist or to dissent against tyranny, fight for genuine reform, and to clamor for justice are wrong. Now, what can be done? We could issue strong statements like the one issued by the rural missionaries of the Philippines, condemning in the highest terms the slander of their organization as supposedly a conduit of funds to the CPP, NPA, and NDF. We should also, as what we are doing, strengthen our solidarity for human rights with the international community. And we thank the United Church of Canada for standing by with us and walking alongside us. When the NCCP was red tagged by the Department of National Defense last November, church groups from around the world has expressed their support for the NCCP. We are also taking part in raising the issue of human rights violations here in the Philippines in the Universal Periodic Review on Human Rights on the Philippines, and together with other human rights organizations are raising this in that forum. We also would urge people to come and see on what's happening on the ground, like what the World Council of Churches did. They sent a 14-member delegation for a pilgrim team visit, and they have come up with some of the things that they are asking the churches to do. Unfortunately, one of those that have guided the team in their visit in Negros was murdered or killed, as she is also tagged as a member of the communist terrorist group. These are some others that can be done by the international community to call on your own governments, particularly, to do some of these, like stop human rights violations against church people and others, especially the indigenous peoples, in their exercise of freedom of religion and expression, and so on. You could go through the line. Lastly, we are also asking for this, that the UN Human Rights Council adopt a resolution to call for an independent fact-finding mission or a commission on inquiry regarding the human rights in the Philippines. This is unfortunately the Iceland resolution in the last Human Rights Council meeting has been quite watered down, but still this provides us a venue by which we could air some of our concerns. And lastly, we will pray and act unceasingly and with full determination to bring an end to the culture and climate of impunity that pervades Philippine society as we work towards the full realization of God's promise of an abundant life for all. Thank you very much, and thank you for your solidarity with us.
Thank you very much, Bishop Marigza, for that presentation, for the keynote address. Friends, I would like to open this time in case we do have questions to ask to Bishop Marigza before we move on into the next presentation. So if there are questions or comments following this keynote address, and feel free just to open your mic and ask a question or make a comment. It's very heart-wrenching to listen to all this in terms of what is happening as people simply want to live freely in their own country. And all these vilifications are happening, all the human rights abuses targeted on people who simply want to speak for the masses. Any question or comment? Anybody who wants to make a comment, or you will reserve that till later?
I'd like to make a comment if I could. It is so disheartening to hear that the situation has deteriorated so badly, and also to see in some of those slides second generation, third generation of people who have been involved in the human rights struggle for so long, people like Beverly Longyear as an example of that, and it just continues for decades. So we will do what we are able from wherever we are, but it is a heartbreak. I thank you, Bishop Ruel, for your really important presentation. It's nice to see you.
Thank you, Nan. Any comment or question? We seem to be doing pretty good with our time, so we will move on to have a partner updates. And the first partner on the list is EcuVoice. EcuVoice will give us an update in terms of what is happening. How are you participating in the entire big agenda of mending the world? Bishop Ruel has mentioned some of those areas that we are called to respond to. Now, over to you, Marvin.
Good morning to my friends in the Philippines and good evening to you in Canada. This PowerPoint presentation will show pictures pre-COVID-19 and during COVID-19. So, the Ecumenical Voice for Human Rights and Peace in the Philippines, amplifying the voices of the marginalized in the national and international spheres. The Ecumenical Voice for Human Rights and Peace in the Philippines was originally the name of the delegation that went to Canada in 2007, in the US, and Geneva, Switzerland. The delegations, we report Let the Stones Cry Out, an ecumenical report on human rights and peace in the Philippines. And it was presented in the Canadian Parliament and churches there in Canada, the US Congress, and Senate. And there was actually a Senate hearing back then, and then submitted in the UN Human Rights Council. So after that, the majority of the organizations who were involved in that Let the Stones Cry Out campaign decided to formally work together as a network. Although bilaterally there have been cooperations prior to that. So the National Council of Churches in the Philippines, Karapatan, the National Union of People's Lawyers, these first three organizations are the co-conveners of the Ecumenical Voice. And then the Ecumenical Bishops Forum, the Promotion of Church People's Response, Task Force on Urban Conscientization, and Contact Philippines. These are national-based organizations banded together to form the EcuVoice. And we have bilateral relations with the Workers' Assistance Center, the Philippine Peace Center, and Initiatives for Peace in Mindanao. We work together so that the human rights situation of the grassroots communities can be amplified in the national sphere and in the international sphere as well, especially within the UN Human Rights Council and other venues that could be where the voices of the marginalized can be amplified. And then this is some pictures of what we do. And as I've said in the beginning, these are combinations of pre-COVID and post-COVID or during COVID pandemic situation. It will show the synergy between these organizations that are members of the network. So part of what we do is we educate people in churches and grassroots communities. This picture was taken with regards to a community consultation on the impact of the pandemic in an urban poor community, led by the Task Force on Urban Conscientization, or TFUC, along with the NCCP. Here are some of the other consultations in the urban poor communities. And we also organize people for human rights and peace. The one on the picture is a mother of a victim of a drug-related killing. So she is Emily Soriano, and she is now part of the Rise Up for Rights and Life, an organization of the relatives, mostly mothers of victims of the war on drugs, that were organized by the Promotion of Church People's Response in cooperation with the task force, with TFUC and NCCP and other faith-based organizations under the EcuVoice. So as you can see, these are the most of the members of the Rise Up organization that we have organized, and they have contributed to filing cases up to the UN Human Rights Council and the International Criminal Court. We also mobilize people for human rights and peace. For example, was just taken on All Souls Day. These are the mothers of Rise Up who went to a very popular religious shrine, the Baclaran Church. It's near the airport, to dramatize their call for justice for their slain or killed loved ones. So, what has become the trend right now is to post selfies in this time of pandemic with regards to various issues, and we mobilize people to do just that and post these pictures on social media. You can see calls against the anti-terrorism law, and then there's the call against violence against women. Of course, what we also do is we see to it that church leaders or church people lend their prophetic voices to the issues of human rights and peace. The picture on the left is Bishop Iniguez, who is the co-chair of the Ecumenical Bishops Forum. And of course, you know Bishop Rex, who is with the other human rights defenders calling for the UN Human Rights Council for to back then to pass the resolution, the Iceland-led resolution on the Philippines. This is the promotion of church people's response, giving ecumenical service during the wake of the baby of a political prisoner who died because she was separated from her mother prematurely, who is in prison. So the PCPR gave an ecumenical mass during her wake. And then we also, of course, conduct fact-finding missions. And we conduct cultural activities. And then, of course, we conduct press conferences and other forms of media projection, like releasing statements. So this one is a day after the passage of the anti-terror law. You can see my General Secretary as part of the Zoom panel who read the statement from the NCCP. This one is on the recent resolution on the Philippines by the UN Human Rights Council on technical cooperation and capability building that was passed last September, or October 7 to be more precise. So that was me, and that was one of the indigenous persons from the Save Our Schools network. Yes, another form of media projection, this one by PCPR and Rise Up. And then we also provide services to grassroots communities. This one is a distribution of medicines to urban poor communities by NCCP and TFUC. And this one is providing relief goods to urban poor communities by Rise Up and NCCP. I cannot show you a picture of a person in sanctuary, but we, as a network, we provide sanctuary, and we have how do you say this, a system of referrals to ensure that those who need sanctuary, being those who are human rights defenders who are being pursued for their advocacy, can be provided with sanctuary. We also file legal cases. This picture shows Bishop Padillo of the UCCP, and they just filed how do you say that, a petition before the Supreme Court. You can see the building behind, with regards to the anti-terrorism law. As of this moment, there are 37 petitions against the anti-terrorism law, and the organizations who are part of the networks of EcuVoice led the filing of church people. Bishop Mariksa was one of the main complainants in this legal case. So another picture of the filing. This was led by PCPR. Of course, we support the peace negotiations, and the Ecumenical Bishops Forum, as the holder of the secretariat, being the secretariat for the Philippine Ecumenical Peace Platform, and Contact Philippines, and PCPR for the Pilgrims for Peace. We have been consistent in our call to pursue the peace negotiations between the government and the National Democratic Front of the Philippines, and to root out the roots of the armed conflict. But what we really do best as a network is we engage the international community. As you can see from our history, it was through the engagement in the US, Canada, and the UN Human Rights Council in Geneva, Switzerland, which became the impetus for the formation of the network. So these are some of the photos from the first Universal Periodic Review of the UN Human Rights Council back in 2008 till 2013, or a few years back. And then under President Duterte, we engaged in the Universal Review process. The EcuVoice led the efforts of the Philippine UPR Watch to submit 19 reports of different organizations and networks to show the human rights record of the government, Philippine government, during the review. This was one of the mobilizations of our delegation and Filipinos and international friends in Geneva. So we also engaged the European Union during that period. So the efforts related to the UPR in 2017, we were able to lobby 14 embassies. We were able to reach out to various offices of special rapporteurs. And as mentioned, we lobbied the European Parliament. 2 members were able to deliver oral statements during the 36th UNHRC session. We conducted 4 side events in Geneva and 6 outside of Geneva in different places and countries in Europe. And we gained a lot of local media mileage. we also did a lot of lobbying related to the Iceland-led July 2019 UNHRC resolution. And these are some photos during the 41st session. You can see Norma of PCPR on the uppermost left corner. She was able to deliver a statement during the session. See photos of the delegation with the special rapporteur on the rights of indigenous peoples, then other meetings, and then there's the obligatory photo ops near with the flags. And then we were also able to send a delegation during the 43rd session in March 2020. And you can see Edre of NUPL, Tinay of Karapatan, Enteng of Kalikasan People's Network for the Environment, and the delegation with Michelle Forst, the then UN Special Rapporteur on Human Rights Defenders. By the way, because of this lobbying, this constant lobbying since 2017, we were able to get various UN Special Rapporteurs, many UN Special Rapporteurs in webinars during this time of the pandemic. So we were able to get Agnes Calamard, Michelle Forst, the new UN Special Rapporteur on Human Rights Defenders, and then on human rights while countering terrorism, all those people, because of our lobbying. So we were able to send an 11-member delegation last March, and they were able to engage 14 missions, country missions, and to support the recommendations, in particular for the initiation of an independent fact-finding mission. We were able to deliver 4 oral interventions. Chikay was one of the 4 oral who delivered the 4 oral interventions. My colleague, she just does not want to put her picture here, so I only showed you 3 persons who gave the oral statements. We had meetings with 4 UN Special Rapporteurs, several international NGO partners, and other offices. And then, because in the 45th session last September, Filipinos, or most of us, cannot go to Geneva. So we asked our colleagues in the WCC to deliver the oral statements for us. So you can see Athena from WCC and Jennifer. Athena delivered a statement on the killing of Zara Alvarez, while Jennifer delivered statements on the human rights violations against indigenous people. So we were able to conduct lobby meetings with various missions. We were able to conduct 2 international webinar campaign events related to the HRC resolution, and that was the Global Day of Action on September 14 and the International Ecumenical Convocation on September 17. And then we were able to participate in the 45th session of the Human Rights Council remotely. As I've shown in the photos, 2 were delivered. There were 6 oral statements and 2 were delivered by WCC. And then NUPL was able to deliver a statement through the International Association of Democratic Lawyers, a statement on work on arbitrary detention. And then Karapatan was able to deliver one through the Asia Pacific Women's Legal I forgot what it means, and civicus, focusing on reprisals against human rights defenders and karapatan. Now, we were able to do this because of being of the organizations that I mentioned being grounded with the grassroots communities and local churches, and working for their civil and political rights and social and economic and cultural rights. Lastly, and this is actually part of our call, this is the Rise Up Mothers with NUPL, and this was during the press conference with regards to the filing of the cases to International Criminal Court, the International Criminal Court. And part of our call to our friends in Canada is to join us in calling for the ICC to release its preliminary findings with regards to the human rights violations in the Philippines, and continue supporting our efforts to gain justice and accountability through the International Criminal Court. So aside from the UN human rights system, we're also looking for other venues like the International Criminal Court to highlight human rights violations. So this was already shared by my General Secretary. I just added the first call to stop the killings and the attacks, including vilification and red tagging. And then the last call, which is our continuing call right now. We are still calling for an independent international investigation, even though the UN Human Rights Council did not pass that kind of resolution. So if you have any questions, Becca will answer them all. No, I'm just kidding. We will answer them both for you. So maraming salamat po.
Salamat po, salamat po. Thank you very much, Marvin, for that very good and clear presentation and update on what EcuVoice has been up to. Are there questions? And while others are thinking about questions or comments, I do have a question which either Marvin or the General Secretary could answer. One of the things that continues to bother me in the work of advocacy on the issues of the Philippines, we write so many letters, we issue so many statements, we have a lot of, before COVID-19, a lot of people, movement, demonstrations, public gatherings where we protest against the injustices. I just wonder, does the Duterte government listen? Do they show any signs of listening to any of these advocacies? And so think about that as I ask Michael Blair to make a comment or a question.
It's probably a bit similar to the question you asked, Japhet, but you've been engaging the kind of international UN system. I mean, what kind of responses, feedback, is it making a difference? What could be done differently, or how to engage that international space?
Thank you. So Bishop Marigsa or Marvin, please have a go at those questions.
Let me try to respond. The question, the answer could be yes and no. At the same time, there are situations in which the government, especially previous ones, have been were forced to listen. This present administration of Duterte usually ignores and always uses the processes that are raised against the Philippines as interference to its national sovereignty. But there have been cases when it has been forced to listen, like when they tried to lower the age of criminal responsibility, lowering it to 12 years old, as well as the reimposition of the death penalty, although there are attempts again to do that. When the international community reminded them that the Philippines is not only a signatory of this, the removal of death penalty, but the reimposition of it would mean some trade sanctions, especially from the European Union, then it quietly remove that from among the urgent bills. But for instance, on the call for on human rights violations, this has been largely ignored, and in fact, the bearers of the information, like the UN special rapporteurs, have been severely attacked on the news and in the president's speeches, and so it's a yes and no. There are times in which the government listens, especially when there are, for instance, protests in the embassies of around the world, the Philippine embassies around the world, calling attention to this, because they are also, in a way, sensitive to the kind of news that is being projected, especially in foreign media. So, and that's why there is always a relentless effort on our part, even if sometimes it's always an uphill struggle to raise the issues of the Philippines.
Thank you, Bishop. Marvin, do you want to add anything?
Yes, thank you, Bishop. Well, actually, there was a certain shift with regards to the stance of the Duterte government in relation to the UN Human Rights Council. It can be gleaned during his speech during the UN General Assembly. And it shows a bit that they are open to international cooperation. And that's a few weeks before the passage of the UN Human Rights Council's resolution on technical capability and capacity building. Well, I think most of you got the update that the NCCP and EcuVoice sent with regards to the 45th UNHRC resolution. And the thing is, the government really lobbied hard other countries, but I think the reason they agreed with the technical assistance and capacity building program or resolution is that they thought that they could, say that they are doing something about the human rights situation in the Philippines, but that's actually that is not the truth, and that is what the resolution actually is saying, that there is actually a problem. And I think we can use the resolution, even though it fell short of our expectations, to push the government to adhere to the resolution, because maybe there are we could push for more response from the government outside the 6 how do you say that, 6 things, for lack of a better word, that they agreed to, that was contained in the resolution. And we could push, for example, to let the UN special rapporteurs who have pending requests to be allowed, even just 2 or 3 of them. Or we could also ask the Philippine government to pass the Human Rights Defenders Bill. So those are things that could be maximized for this resolution. So because the government, even though it does not show it, that they are concerned with the international attention that all these human rights violations are getting, they are actually concerned. And that's why we have to, as Bishop has said, we really have to maximize all venues and push for the government's compliance to its international human rights commitments.
Thank you very much, Marvin. Friends, well, we have a lot to learn, a lot to hear this night and this morning from the Philippines. But I will give us now a 5 minutes break before we have the last presentation of the day that will come. We will now have a presentation from the Cordillera People's Alliance, an indigenous organization supporting the right to self-determination in the Cordillera region. And Bestang, who is the General Secretary of the organization, will start the presentation, and most likely maybe the chairperson of the CPA might also speak to us. But first of all, they have a message for us through this video presentation.
The mountainous region of Cordillera sits upon the richest natural resources and minerals in the Philippines and the world. Its pristine surroundings, dense woodlands, watersheds, and rich soils is where millions of metric tons of gold, copper, manganese, and other minerals can be found. Its inhabitants of closely related indigenous peoples, collectively known as Igorots, enjoy Cordillera's richness, enabling them to sustain agriculture on mountainside rice terraces and to develop distinct and interweaved culture and traditions. The great majority of Cordillera's Igorots, with the non-indigenous and migrant peoples, live as peasants, small production farmers, and wage and informal workers. The Cordillera people pride themselves with a rich history of struggle against the World Bank-funded Chico dams and the timber logging project of the Cello Field during the Marcos dictatorship. And this fight lives on. The promotion and defense of indigenous people's rights, human rights, social justice, and national freedom and democracy endure as challenges and attacks intensify today.
Today's Cordillera is blanketed with more than 100 mining applications covering more than 900,000 hectares of land and more than 100 hydropower and geothermal power projects. Indigenous communities' voices are excluded as their rights to free, prior and informed consent are undermined. and in areas where mining and energy projects exist, heavy militarization occurs to silence any form of resistance. These violations of ancestral land rights and self-determination mean ethnocide of the Igorots and the destruction of Cordillera's environment.
As we see a rise in development aggression, rights violations escalate against the Cordillera People's Alliance, the forefront alliance of people's organizations, environmental, indigenous, and human rights defenders in the Cordillera. CPA leaders and members have been listed by state agents as terrorists, insurgents, and armed rebels in malicious cases. Although these charges have been dismissed, government instrumentalities led by the National Task Force to End Local Communist Armed Conflict continue to tag them as communist terrorist groups and enemies of the state.
Targeting legitimate dissent and actions to uphold ancestral land rights, human rights, and environmental protection not only violates people's basic rights and freedoms, but undermines their work and endangers their life and safety. Health worker Rachel Mariano, with 4 other human rights defenders, was jailed for 1 year due to made-up charges by the military. Leader of Ifugao peasant movement, Ricardo Mayumi, was extrajudicially killed in 2017 for opposing the entry of a mini hydropower project. Before his murder, he was subjected to intense harassment, vilification, and illegal surveillance by suspected military elements. Brandon Lee, a US citizen and Ifugao peasant movement volunteer, survived an attempted murder in his home in August 2019 by suspected state agents. He was seriously wounded and went under critical health status for weeks. Before his shooting, he was hounded by threats and harassment, even in social media. We need your help. Support Defend Cordillera PH online campaigns by creating materials to show the world the Cordillera's challenges. Gather friends, families, and personalities to learn about Defend Cordillera PH and the Cordillera People's Alliance work. Organize activities and actions to express your solidarity.
Bring Defend Cordillera PH to your government and state representatives, to civic organizations, churches, and international bodies. Ask them to push the Philippine government, the big companies and their funders to stop the attacks on Cordillera human rights defenders and to stop all plunderous projects in ancestral lands.
Raise funds for Defend Cordillera PH. Support the legal battle and grassroots work to amplify the defense of the community for their land, life, and resources.
The Cordillera people need you. Help us to strengthen global solidarity to defend the Cordillera against plunder and state terror.
Pestang, over to you.
Yes, sorry, I was on mute. So again, thank you everyone, and good morning, good evening. Now I am going to show some slides. Actually, the video that you have just watched is an overview of the current situation and the issues faced by indigenous peoples here in the Cordillera. Okay, what happened? So anyway, yeah, I will just add some explanations and expound a bit about the contents of the video and also add more recent updates. So with me here in this webinar are my colleagues. There's Windel Bolinget, our chairperson, and then Isa Mariano is the Deputy Secretary General of the Cordillera People's Alliance. So our region is this is the map. It's a small region of 1.8 million hectares, or about 5 million acres of land. Majority of its population is around 80 to 85% indigenous peoples called Igorots. So what you see in the map are the areas where applications for hydropower and geothermal projects are located. The numbers on both sides refer to the number of applications for mostly dam projects and some geothermal projects in all the 6 provinces of the region. And these are on top of 3 existing or operating large dams in the southern part of the region. And the yellow marks, those are where the applications for large-scale mining projects are situated. And these applications include Canadian mining companies' applications or their local subsidiaries in the Philippines. One is called Philippine Metals Incorporated. It has 2 projects in 2 provinces. Another is called Solfatara, which is in Abra province, and altogether these projects cover a total of 12,820 hectares of land in indigenous communities in the Cordillera. In 2015, we have learned that this company named Crazy Horse, that is now known as Rockwealth Resources Corporation, was trying to buy several extractive projects of Solfatara in the Philippines, including the mining project applications in the Cordillera. This is still a Canadian company. And when my colleague Wendell Bulinget was discussing this in a webinar last month with Canadian audience, there were those who said that Crazy Horse is the name of an American Indian who is in fact an indigenous hero for the American Indians. But this company named itself Crazy Horse and is doing the exact opposite of honoring a hero of indigenous peoples, because they intend to destroy indigenous lands like their plan here in the Philippines. So the name is almost a mockery to indigenous peoples, particularly the American Indians. So now, why are there people here in the region opposing large-scale mining and dams and other energy projects?
Estang,
Yeah.
sorry, is it possible to just share your PowerPoint in full screen?
The way to do that is to go up to the view at the very top of your screen in the PowerPoint, if you can see that.
There you are.
There you go.
Yeah, there.
That's better. Thank you, Bestang.
Okay, so yeah, why are there people here in the Cordillera that are opposing large-scale mining and dams and other energy projects? Currently, there are 3 big dams built along one river in Benguet province, and also there are 3 operating large-scale mines also in the province of Benguet in the southern part of the Cordillera. These mining projects have been operating as early as 1904, and the big dams as early as the 1950s. So in all those decades, the people have seen how devastating, how destructive these projects are to the people and the environment. Communities were displaced, livelihood were lost, like rice fields and other agricultural livelihood. The major rivers are silted from the dams. You can see the photo in the upper left corner. And the rivers were also poisoned by toxic waste from mining operations. And then the lowlands are being flooded when huge volumes of water are released from the dams, as you can see in some of those photos there. And in mining areas, there were numerous instances of ground subsidence, which sank houses and even a whole elementary school because the undergrounds have already been mined out. And so the land has become dirt in these mining areas. And these are some of the reasons why people do not want any new mining or dam project or even the expansion of these mining operations. But at this time of pandemic, these mining companies are continuously operating. There are already reported outbreaks in 2 of the mining sites here in the Cordillera, 143 cases in Philex mining area and at least 88 in another mining area, which was why last week the Department of Health said that they will investigate, and they acknowledged that COVID transmissions are more likely to occur in mining tunnels because these are enclosed without proper ventilation. But this just shows how simply bad large-scale mining is even during this time of pandemic, and all in the name of profit for the mining companies. Making matters worse, in the areas where there are project applications for mining and dams, especially where there are people, organizations, or communities who say no to these projects, the government deploys military forces. So in the map, you see green marks there. Those are the locations of military deployment. And at present, there are 6 battalions and 1 brigade under the 5th and 7th Infantry Division of the military that operate in the region. And in addition, there are so-called anti-insurgency policies of the government that are being implemented, an operation plan, and then President Duterte's Executive Order 70, or the whole of nation approach to end local communist armed conflict. The right photo was taken in 2014 when forests were bombed by the military, creating huge forest fires, destroying so much in that forest. And the left photo was a picture I took in my hometown in 2018 when military troops encamped in residential areas, which is a violation of the law. And that place is covered by the mining application of Cordillera Exploration Incorporated. So the problem with the so-called anti-insurgency policies, and especially Duterte's Executive Order 70, which has a task force that is implementing it from the national level down to the community level, is that these target civilians, activists, legitimate people's organizations, including our organization, the Cordillera People's Alliance, those who have been fiercely opposing destructive projects and speaking out against human rights violations. So it's not actually addressing the underlying causes of insurgency and resolving the ongoing war in the country. The implementation of this executive order in our region started in middle of last year, so that as early as June last year, we have learned that in the documents of this task force, our organization is named as a communist terrorist organization or group, and including the names of Windel, Beverly Longid, and other former leaders of our organization. And during the pandemic, the implementation of this executive order has been an all-out attack against the Cordillera People's Alliance. And then now there's the anti-terrorism law, which can easily declare that our acts of opposing mining, opposing large dam projects are acts of terrorism under this law. So this is in fact state terrorism because it is the state that is sowing terror or fear in the communities. It is not the people or organizations like the Cordillera People's Alliance that is the problem. The Cordillera People's Alliance, it's composed of 307 community-based indigenous peoples and sectoral organizations, which was founded 36 years ago in 1984. In the many years of CPA's existence, it has been at the forefront of the struggles in the region against destructive projects, against human rights violations. We have been doing a lot of protests against government laws that violate our rights. And until now, these hundreds of mining and energy applications are not successful in operating in our land. So basically, for the government and private companies, the CPA has been an obstacle in their advancing their political and economic interests, and especially because CPA has grown stronger and bigger throughout the years, throughout the decades. That is why now there is a systematic government attack against the CPA. They want to punasin. They want to erase the CPA in history. So Bishop Ruel, Mervyn, they have already mentioned about some of the attacks against the people in the Philippines, including the Cordillera People's Alliance, the indigenous peoples in the Cordillera. In fact, the Duterte regime has seized this opportunity of COVID pandemic to further impose his dictatorship. And it is at this time of pandemic that a systematic attack against the CPA is happening. And these are in various forms. One is red tagging, terrorist labeling, and political vilification, or portraying us as criminals, as terrorists, as immoral, and including our children in the social media attacks. The photo that was shown earlier by Bishop Ruel of Windel and children, those are his children, and one of them is a minor, and this minor has been experiencing harassment through messages, threatening messages, and also anonymous calls to his cell phone. And then, so one of the results of this red tagging, terrorist labeling, and vilification is that our families are equally experiencing harassments and threats, and of course the psychological impacts of the attacks. When the pandemic started, our organization led a COVID response, distributing food, vitamins, personal protective equipment, and sanitation kits. But even this initiative of helping the poor and marginalized who were greatly affected by the pandemic was tagged as activities of terrorist communist organizations. And they, in these messages that they posted at Facebook, they were telling people not to donate to this communist terrorist group. Of course, many of the posts at social media were done by the military and police. So one of the posts here, it says 54th Infantry Battalion, Infantry Magilas, that's of the Philippine military. And second, political dissent, environmental defense, and human rights defense are being criminalized. Before the pandemic, as already mentioned in previous presentations, there were 5 human rights defenders that started to face trump-up cases, including Rachel Mariano. And just a few days ago, on October 25 at 4 o'clock in the morning, military and police searched the houses of 11 people in a community in Kalinga province, after which they claimed to have found explosives in the house of Betty Belen, a woman leader who fiercely opposed the geothermal project of energy giant Chevron. So she was brought to jail and she remains detained until now because of the planting of evidence that that the search party did to her. And also on October 3, another indigenous activist was served a subpoena claiming that he is facing murder charges. And 2 months ago in September, the police regional director in the Cordillera announced that they will be filing legal charges against the Cordillera People's Alliance for allegedly recruiting members of the New People's Army. And then the extrajudicial killings have also been mentioned in earlier presentations. The fourth one, individual members of our alliance are being harassed by the military and forcing them to sign documents to clear their names from being members or supporters of the New People's Army. And then after that, the military and police will declare them as surrenderies of the armed group New People's Army when the truth is they are not. So, or they make them sign documents that say that they are denouncing the Cordillera People's Alliance and partner organizations of the CPA. Just yesterday, our chapter in Mountain Province reported that another group of the military visited known leaders and members of our organization and convincing them to sign documents. They were scared. It's good that they did not sign the documents, but they were scared to even take photos or get the names of the military that visited them. But they noticed that some of their motorcycles did not have plate numbers. So that's the one that they took a photo of. And that's what you see in this, in the PowerPoint. And vehicles without plate numbers, it's dangerous because it has been a tactic of the military in order to get away when they commit crimes or do unpleasant things. So one impact of militarization, this Executive Order 70 or state terror in the Cordillera to CPA members is fear. Now they fear for their lives. They fear the mere presence of the military and police in the communities, and those are where the military and police are concentrated. And if they are not immediately supported or given some advice, they might choose to just keep silent, which is just the very purpose of the military for doing all of this, to stop people from resisting development aggression and repression. Also, over the past months, the military had been working on convincing local government units to declare the Cordillera People's Alliance persona non grata in communities. A local government executive, who is also an implementer of Executive Order 70, has already made his local government pass a resolution declaring us the CPA persona non grata in their town. And to be declared persona non grata is again very dangerous because with this, the government can easily use these persona non grata declarations or resolutions to proscribe or designate the CPA as a terrorist organization just by using the anti-terror law. And lastly, another form of attacking the CPA is historical revisionism or distorting the history of Cordillera Indigenous peoples' struggles and CPA's role in advancing the rights of indigenous peoples. They want to make it appear that the CPA has been lying and has been deceiving people. But in what they are doing, it is actually the government that is now deceiving the people and outrightly disregarding the Cordillera people's gains in the many years and decades of our struggle for our rights. And the government went as far as threatening to demolish the monument of the anti-Chico Dam's heroes. That's where you see in the photo there. This monument was requested to the CPA by the families of the heroes. So it became a project of the CPA together with the families of these heroes and their communities until it was built and inaugurated in 2017. So the government's systematic attempts at delegitimizing the CPA is a precursor towards a crackdown against the CPA membership and communities in the region. We expect more widespread and bloody attacks like extrajudicial killings, and then the proscription or designation of CPA as a terrorist organization. that is why in September, we launched the Defend Cordillera campaign, Defend CPA campaign. This is an integrated campaign against the plunder of our lands and resources and state terror in the region, including promoting people's rights. So we've been doing a lot of online campaigning, like webinars, seeking people outside of CPA to issue statements of support, conducting dialogues with local government units, and also the Department of Public Works and Highways, which was the one that issued the demolition order to the monument. We've been doing some submissions submissions of complaint to the Commission on Human Rights, and even to Facebook, complaint to Facebook for all the malicious posts that have been there since April. We are also exploring filing of a complaint against one of the local executives because of that persona non grata resolution that he now wants to become a local law or a local ordinance. And of course, a lot of campaigning in relation to Betty, to free Betty right now, and then to stop the demolition of the monument. And simultaneously, our chapters have been conducting meetings on how to face all of these attacks to the CPA and our members on the ground. And this coming November 7, we will be holding an online meeting of the Regional Council of the Cordillera People's Alliance. This includes representatives of the provincial chapters and sectoral affiliates of CPA. So yeah, we need support and solidarity to defend the Cordillera and to defend the CPA, the Cordillera People's Alliance, because we cannot defend the Cordillera if we are unable to defend the organization of the people in the Cordillera, which is the Cordillera People's Alliance. We can only effectively defend the Cordillera if we are able to defend this alliance. So there are many ways by which an individual organization or group can extend support. The United Church has been very supportive of us, the Cordillera People's Alliance, and even the Defend Cordillera campaign. We are truly grateful to the United Church, both in Canada and the UCCP in the Philippines, for standing with us in this most trying times. Just so you may share with others some ways others may support our listed there, but that would be taking part in activities of the Defend Cordillera campaign. There is this Global Solidarity Pact. If you just visit the website, some of you have already signed on to this Solidarity Pact. Generate attention on the issues that we face by spreading the word, organizing activities, coming out with statements, etc. And then helping pressure the Philippine government to act on these issues, for instance, by signing on to the online petitions and urgent appeals that we face. And lastly, we welcome donations and initiatives to raise funds to support us in the expenses. One would be for legal expenses, like for instance, Betty Belen and our other colleague who are facing trump-up charges. And then just this morning, our chapter in Benguet province has called me. They were asking if there are some funds that they can access, because they just learned that some of the members of the communities, the mining company Lepanto has filed charges against some members of the communities. This mining company has been filing cases against those in the communities that are against the expansion of its operations. And of course, expenses for other campaigns and related needs. Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Bestang, for that presentation from the Cordillera. Very, very clear. Friends, any questions, any comments? One of the things, again, that came to my mind as you were presenting Bestang, and I think about all of you, my colleagues in the Philippines, how do you protect yourself when you are constantly being red tagged? Maybe you, Wendell, the chairperson, could tell us, how do you protect yourself? Because these people seem to be bent on attacking you at all costs.
That's a
I've
very
already
difficult.
asked Wendell about that.
Yes, Wendell, go ahead.
That's a very difficult question,
No.
Reverend Dr. Javed and colleagues. Yeah, before answering that, again, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are. Besides the United Church of Canada and the United Church of Christ in the Philippines, we also acknowledge the friendship and continuing support and solidarity of the National Council of Churches in the Philippines and all partners of the UCC in the Philippines, and all these campaigns or community-initiated activities that we do to advance and fight for our rights as human beings, as indigenous peoples and historically marginalized people, and of course the environment. The question a while ago is that I guess the fundamental reason that we continue to exist, even despite of this inhuman and worsening attacks, is because of our commitment, because of our determination, and we exist because of the Cordillera peoples that we pledged to and committed to defend and fight for their rights, even our lives are on the line. And this has been, in fact, the case not just during the Duterte government, but since 1984, because the history of the Cordillera peoples, which is also the history of the Cordillera Peoples Alliance, is a history of injustice and therefore a history of resistance and struggle. But we also we can also withstand all these attacks as how do we sustain living despite these various forms of attacks, states and whole of government attacks against CPE, is because we also know that we have supporters like you. This is why it's not only our commitment with the Cordillera peoples, because that's our commitment, but because also of your friendship and solidarity, and which is why it was inspiring to and greatly strengthening our morale, like joining this online conference and meeting you, even you are there miles away, and it seems that distance is not a factor because it seems we are still very close together. And that's I guess the secret why we still exist. Of course, we don't want to reach the level of widespread state terrorism, the bloody human rights violations as experienced by our brothers and sisters in Mindanao, in Negros, and other regions of the country. We don't want to happen here in the Cordillera. You might ask, for example, the figures or numbers of extrajudicial killings, trump-up charges. It's not as hundreds like in Mindanao or in Negros. But the reason we are hell-bent on confronting these attacks is because they are preparing the ground for this widespread crackdown and bloody attacks. And with your help, we hope that we will not reach we will not reach this point. But I guess to also answer that question, the credibility and the legitimacy that CPA was able to establish since 1984 here in the Cordillera, in the communities, in the Philippines and abroad, is, I guess, the reason it is not very easy for the state, military and the government to just attack us easily. So their tactic is to delegitimize, demonize us first, and towards their intention of trying to erase us in history on paper and physically. Yeah, and with the inspiration of our heroes and martyrs, that even their monument were just silently standing there in Kalinga, like the monument of Makliing Dulag, are being threatened to be demolished. That's really too much. It's really too much. So what is left to fear? If the state and government is like this, what is there to be afraid of? If this is the situation that we are in? Because once we show that we fear, what is there to fear? Our lives, in a way, is not just for us. Our lives is for the people. So it's an honor to die for the people. And I guess that's our secret why we're still brave enough to confront this. And from the opening prayer by our great bishop a while ago about those verses from the Bible, I guess that's also one of the teachings that we try to learn from here. And of course, it's very difficult because even my children, my wife, and our families are being targeted. They don't spare our children and our families. And in fact, in the presentation of Bestang a while ago, we are not just being vilified as criminals, terrorists, we are vilified as immorals. One example is, they want to present the picture that I and Bestang have an illicit love affair. They want to picture and present CPA as an evil organization by sorghum manufacturing data that the CPA is just controlled by few families. So this lies is really too much. So what is there to be afraid of? So I guess that's my response, but I'm sure I was not able to respond to that satisfactorily, because but that is what I can I can say now. Thank you.
Thank you, Wendell. Thank you, Wendell. Well, that's a very powerful statement there. It's an honor to die for the people. Wow. Thank you. Are there other comments, friends? Please feel free to just jump in case you have a comment or a question.
Yeah, and by the way, thank you, Dr. Reverend Joseph, for reading our Global Solidarity Pact. Yeah, thank you for that.
Thank you.
In the previous, and we have a video for that, and so thank you for that.
It was a pleasure to participate in that. Thank you. Any question or comment?
We need your help.
Thank you, Noel. Good to see you here all the way. Thank you. Thank you.
Can I say something?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I've been distributing some of what I have been in communication with Patricia Lison, and it just so happened that I wasn't able to co-moderate with her last September because of a regional meeting here in Region 5. But nevertheless, we are expanding and disseminating information about Cordillera PH. So we are with you, far as we may be from each other, but just to say to all of you that we are with you. Kasama ninyo kami.
Maraming salamat po.
Thank you, Noel. Is it snowing in Winnipeg? No, I didn't hear that.
It is snowing with COVID-19.
Oh.
It is snowing with COVID-19. Our cases have gone up, but we're bracing for the cold December, January. Very cold.
Any question, comments? Friends, thank you very much for coming. We will close our session for today here, and we will continue tomorrow, same time, same platform. And Bishop Rex will open us with a prayer for the day. And we will start with the United Church of Christ update, which Reverend Frank and Bishop Labuntog will bring to us. So just before we close off, let's just share in a word of prayer. We thank you, loving God, for today. We thank you for what we have heard from our partners. As we continue to listen, to learn, and discern what the Spirit is calling us to do, we pray for your blessings. Especially we pray for a blessing of strength upon our partners as they do such difficult work of being prophetic, of standing up for life, of standing up for justice, of standing up for peace. We commit them into your hands for your blessings upon their lives as they go about their work in this day. And for us here in North America, as we conclude our day, keep us in your love until we meet again tomorrow. These things we have prayed through Christ our Lord. Amen. Thank you very much, friends. We will see you tomorrow evening, tomorrow morning for you, tomorrow evening for us here. And maybe by then, we will know who's the president for our neighbor here.